Greetings, my lovelies. This is Blake here, and welcome to my review of Star Wars The Force Awakens. It is finally here. Now, I love the original Star Wars trilogy almost as much as I loathe the Star Wars prequel trilogy, but my feelings are a little bit more complex than that. For example, I think Return of the Jedi is vastly inferior to the first Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back, even though it's still a pretty good movie. And I actually think Revenge of the Sith is okay. It just didn't quite make up for the suckitude that was Attack of the Clones and especially The Phantom Menace. But Star Wars in general was just one of those definitive experiences of my childhood. I got really big into the toys. I collected some of the books. I watched the movies all religiously, and then when the prequels came out, I didn't hate them at first, but at the same time, I subconsciously knew that they weren't very good movies because I never had any desire to check them out more than once. In fact, with Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, I only saw them when they were initially released in theaters, and the only reason I viewed Phantom Menace multiple times was because it seemed like every birthday party or field trip they would always have that playing. And even then I'd usually try to do something different. Like, I have this distinct memory of, we were on a field trip and it was playing on the bus, and me and one of my friends were watching the Samuel Jackson Shaft on a portable DVD player instead. So there was a lot of expectations for this new film, and I was really pumped up to see it. I thought the marketing campaign was awesome, and George Lucas wasn't involved, and I always try to give the man more respect than everybody else because he is the reason behind, or at least one of the reasons why the first trilogy existed, and in many ways probably contributed to its success. But I thought it was time for him just to back off and leave. The prequels showed that he was kind of out of touch with his audience, and J.J. Abrams was a good choice for director. I liked all of his films. I wasn't crazy about that selection though, just because he seemed kind of like the predictable choice. At least with the subsequent directors, I think Rian Johnson and Colin Trevorrow, they're a little unexpected, although Trevorrow concerns me just because I wasn't thrilled about Jurassic World. And the reviews were really positive, but I saw that film in IMAX, by the way, and The Force Awakens is pretty good. It's hard judging it, though, because Star Wars in many ways has morphed over the years. Really, it was my generation who built up the original trilogy into the classics they are now regarded as. When they first came out, Star Wars was well liked, but in the same way that Transformers was well liked. Empire Strikes Back was regarded as a major disappointment, and Return of the Jedi was considered a step up. Well, now it's all changed to where Empire Strikes Back is regarded as the best, and Return of the Jedi is regarded as the worst. And when the prequels first came out, they had a much more mixed reaction than they do now, whereas most people seem to be pretty negative. So you never know what people are going to think about The Force Awakens 10 years from now. Will it be held in the same high regard as the original trilogy, or will people eventually start to reject it and think it's on par with the prequels? Well, in my opinion, it's going to find a middle ground. I liked this movie a lot more than the prequels, but at the same time, I don't think it's going to be the same cultural phenomenon that the original trilogy was. I don't think it's quite on par with those, although it's close to Return of the Jedi. There's a lot to like about this movie. For one, it is just very entertaining. The pacing, overall pacing, it's very fast, and even though the movie's over 2 hours long, it really did not feel that way. It kept moving quickly without running out of stamina. In total contrast to, let's say, The Phantom Menace, where it started off moving really quickly, but then it just burned you out really quickly to where you just started to get really bored. I never felt that with The Force Awakens. However, I still thought the original trilogy had better pacing just because it allowed you to absorb more details in this universe. You know, all the musical pieces, the visuals, the set pieces, they all really stood out in those movies and have become very iconic. The Force Awakens moves a little bit too fast to where I don't think my mind was able to fully process everything. So even though, you know, the music's really good, the special effects are awesome, and there is some, you know, unique stuff, I just don't know if they're going to stay with me for very long. They might, but I'm not entirely convinced that they will. But still, the special effects, like I said, are awesome. I love the emphasis on the practical effects. They build actual sets, and that's really cool. That's how a Star Wars movie should be done. And they just use CGI to enhance certain effects, or, you know, a lot of the faces seem to be done using CGI. And like the prequels, the CGI does tend to stand out, which I don't consider to be a good thing. However, unlike the prequels, I still think the CGI is impressive. Whether they've aged well, or whether these effects have aged well, you know, down the line, we'll just have to see. I do remember a time when the prequels were lauded for their, you know, CGI effects, and that has not held up very well at all. But still, the action scenes, I thought the editing, the cinematography, the sound design, very exciting. I loved the dogfights, the aerial dogfights. I loved the lightsaber duels. There's more choreography, and they move faster than what we got in the original trilogy, but they aren't too fancy like the prequels. And there's a lot of emotional content there. You know, when they're swinging those laser blades, they really seem like they're trying to hurt somebody. And I that's one of the things I really felt the prequels lacked, was nobody really showed any emotion throughout anything, and that really undermined the tension. And I kind of attribute this to the actors not entirely being sure how to, you know, perform in front of a green screen that was sort of new at the time. But still, like, you know, characters would find themselves in peril, and they wouldn't look afraid or nervous at all. They'd just be like the one scene that stands out, I think, was in Attack of the Clones, when Obi-Wan Kenobi gets knocked off this base and he could plummet to his death, and I think Jango Fett standing over him about to shoot him down, and then he just goes, "Uh-oh," and then immediately, you know, fixes the situation. And there's no suspense there. If the actors don't seem afraid, that means the characters aren't nervous. Therefore, I have no reason to really feel those stakes. Well, in this film, you know, characters are always looking terrified before they enter a major battle, and that just really added to the whole experience. It gave me an emotional connection to what was going on. I especially love, you know, well, you see in the previews, like when Finn's about to confront Kylo Ren, and he's like, "Oh shit, oh shit, oh shit." That was awesome, and I thought the characters were very likable. Maybe just as likable as the original cast. They pretty much deconstruct all of the original cast's attributes, then mix them together while adding some new stuff. And that could have easily been a criticism, you know, for this new cast, but it worked for me. I thought they were all likable. I thought they were all interesting. They had distinct personalities, strong character arcs. They do develop throughout the course of the film, and the acting was really good. However, my only concern there is it seemed like they went through all of their development in this movie, to where I'm not entirely sure how they can grow in subsequent films. I'm sure they'll figure a way, but like when you look at Luke from the original Star Wars, in the first film, yeah, by the end credits, he had grown. He had become a little bit more mature, but still, he was a hot-headed brat to a lesser extent in the second film. His journey really wasn't complete until the third film, and when you consider what happens in this movie, even that's, you know, he's still changing, whereas I don't really see how these new characters will continue to develop. But we'll see. And the original cast I thought was utilized very well. Han Solo has a prominent role, and Harrison Ford, is great in it. I loved his comedic timing, his charm, but I was concerned that it would look weird that they'd write him to be a young man even though he's an old man, and it would just look really awkward. But at the same time, if you made Han Solo a lot more mature, it would take away the charm that made the original film so appealing, or the original characterization so appealing. But no, they found the perfect balance, and I find it strange how Harrison Ford always bashes the character of Han Solo when Han Solo seems to bring out more of him as an actor. Luke barely has a cameo. Carrie Fisher was sort of the weak link. I don't know if she had Botox done or something, but her face barely seemed to move, and this was a little awkward. Her line delivery was very rusty, even though it was cool seeing her interact with Harrison Ford again. The story, I think, is solid, but it's still, its tendency to rely on nostalgia sometimes backfired. Like the Star Killer, which is the new Death Star, I really felt was unnecessary. In the original Star Wars, the Death Star was pretty much what kicked off the entire story, so therefore its destruction in the climax really meant something. Well, here, it's the hunt for Luke that's kicking off the story, so therefore the climax should be based around them finding him. And so the Star Killer just seemed really superfluous to me. They just had that in there so the supporting cast would have something to do. But I did enjoy most of the fan service when characters would be introduced, like Han and Chewie. That was really well done, and it made me squee. I love C-3PO's introduction for some reason. It just seemed like the perfect way to bring back C-3PO. There is one major event in this film that's going to be very controversial, but I thought it was really well executed. However, that is followed up by another very tragic moment that I thought kind of took away some of its thunder. In my opinion, there should have been only one tragic event to happen at this climax, then the next one would be the sequel. Because usually in the second film of a trilogy, that's when things end at their darkest. And I thought A Force Awakens sort of ended a little dark. But we'll see what happens in subsequent installments. And both scenes were still very well handled. It just a bit too much tragedy for this first entry. But still, it had all the stuff I love about Star Wars, all the creative designs from the alien races to the vehicles to the weapons. And it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. I think Kylo Ren was an interesting villain too, because he's not just Darth Vader. He's not about presence, and he's a developing character who's in a lot of ways more like Anakin from the prequels, except better. Better acting, better character development. It just made more sense. But a lot of people won't like the character for that reason. But I thought it was intriguing, and I'm interested in seeing where the sequels go with a lot of these characters, because a lot of the supporting cast doesn't have a whole lot to do. The only person I outright disliked was General Hux. He's just a generic Tarkin type character. However, Tarkin was more interesting because A, Vader answered to him, whereas Hux and Kylo Ren seemed to be on equal standing. And I just didn't like the actor. I thought, Peter Cushing is a really good actor, but the guy who played General Hux, just, I wasn't feeling it. His attempts to evoke Hitler during his speech, I thought were very cheesy. The Nazi imagery, by the way, was way too overdone here. But he was the weak link. But all in all, I still thought this movie was fun. I don't think it's going to go down as a classic, but I did enjoy it. So you should watch it, well, at least if you're a Star Wars fan. If you'd like to read my written review, please check the link in my description. Also, I've done written reviews of NXT TakeOver London and WWE's TLC, so read those if you're into wrestling. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter, and I shall see you guys later.